Yo, what's up, homies? All right, so we're going to be doing dungeon video guides. Basically, I did a lot of dungeons on the beta, a ton of M+, and I wanted to bring you guys some just like some advice, some tips, some tricks, so you guys as well can jump into your dungeons and be successful fairly on in the season. Obviously, strategies aren't like fully fleshed out, but these were pretty meta strategies and kind of things that you should be looking to do or looking to know with the dungeons that come out as they come out in M+. This is going to help you out early season and just kind of learning what's going on. And I hope you guys enjoy. All right, let's bang out Azure Vault. So this can be a VOD from Cryptics. I have some VODs from Azure Vault, and I did it like post changes. But the VODs that I had from Azure Vaults were pre-changes. I needed something that was a bit more recent to be able to talk about some of the major things that they did with this dungeon, and just to make sure that nothing like displays differently than roughly how you're going to see it, particularly with like the first and the last boss. That was going to be the stuff that was going to be, I mean, those are some of the major pain points in the dungeon. I don't want anything that's like completely different than what you see. So this is why we're using a VOD from Cryptics. Go check his stream down in the description. High key pusher, range DPS player, actually plays a bit of everything. So yeah, go check his stream out. So first and foremost, I think that Azure Vault, a lot of the difficulty of the dungeon is localized to the very beginning of this dungeon. And so I think that just taking it slow in the beginning and trying to explain exactly what you need to be wary of is incredibly important. So first off, you see these lashers that are planted in the ground here. These lashers, they have a cast. I think it's called like Mystic Vapors. This Mystic Vapors cast is actually incredibly dangerous if you get it stacked up too much. If you have any free kicks, you should be looking to launch them into the Mystic Vapors casts. Additionally, doing what this group is doing and making sure that everything is getting lined into the corner, and then you can utilize like AoE stuns is going to be the most important thing. In addition to the Mystic Vapors cast, this Tender, which is this tree guy, he has an erratic growth cast, which should be interrupted basically as often as possible. Now, the erratic growth, what it does is it turns a player into a tree. The tree has like a circle around it. It can be dispelled, so there is a world where you let it go through, but like the circle on it is pretty scary. And so I think that just generally kicking it and not looking to dispel it is your best bet, because in addition to that, if you dispel it and you're on top of another player, it will stun your whole entire group. And so you actually do see that this group has one of those go off, and so somebody ends up getting stunned for an incredibly long time. And it's just a situation that you should be looking to kick that pretty much as often as possible. Just forcing one melee to be looking to kick that every single time is going to be in your best benefit, because it is a one melee kick rotation. Then every other interrupt should be just like launched straight into the lashers. Beyond that, there's not much trash that you actually want to pull in that first room or in this first hallway. Those are the only real mobs that you want to be pulling. Anything to do with whelps, pretty much off limits. Now, let's pause for a second and talk about these whelps. So as you see on screen here, these whelps actually fly around and they have like a circle on them, yeah? There's also a bunch of petrified mobs that are like not active, whether it be this Neltharian's Layer Rock dude. We got this Geode over here. These guys are pretty off limits, generally. These mobs, what they do is whenever the whelp gets pulled, it starts casting Shriek. And it's a 4-second cast that'll recast after it's done. And the whelps actually have a decent amount of HP, and so they're difficult to kill. If they get the Shriek cast off, so say you don't stun it or whatever, then these petrified mobs become unpetrified, and even if you wipe to them, they do not re-stun themselves. And so this is a situation that you need to make sure that you do not pull the whelp, or if you do pull the whelp, you have to kill it immediately and like CC chain it to the point where it doesn't get the cast off. I generally think that not pulling it is your best bet, and that was the meta for most of beta for how to deal with Azure Vaults. And so a lot of it is going to involve you pulling these lashers, and so like a lot of times you're just going to pull these lashers back. You're going to end up kicking them. You're just silence them with like a silent sigil or whatever, and trying to get just make sure that the Vapors cast is getting interrupted. Then whenever the whelp is at the far side patrol, after you end up killing off these lashers, you could either para it, you could CC it or something like that to make sure it stops its pat. You could even like root it or something like that. It's not that big of a deal. Or you could just wait for it to natty patrol. And then you're going to walk up into this area around the whelp. This area right here, from here, you're going to just jump down into the Leymor room, as you see on screen here. And this allows you to additionally skip another one of those tenders, which it's not efficient count. In addition to that, you have the unfortunate reality that the whelp may patrol into you. And so the whelp and the petrified mobs are by far the most difficult part of this first area, and you should be looking to skip basically all the petrified mobs. If they get pulled, you may wipe. There are, like, the key is significantly more difficult. Okay, now we have tenders and, like, slime oozlings. I don't know exactly what they're called. Saplings, apparently, is what they're called. It's a situation where the saplings don't really do anything. They're just pad mobs. You, again, need to make sure that you have a one melee kick rotation, somebody that is assigned to kick the tenders. Additionally, you can let one go off, assuming that people are spread properly, and just use a healer dispel on it. That is an option. I think that there's more of an option here than it was in the previous pull because of the position of the previous pull, but that is an option here. Now, they do a good job of making sure that these just all get kicked, so nobody's stunned even for half a global or whatever, because there's not really too much else going on. All right, first boss, Leymor. So Leymor, once it's pulled, it will summon trees in the ground. And there's two ways of getting rid of these trees. And whenever these trees explode, they summon the saplings, the slimes that we saw in the previous pull. The first way of getting rid of these trees is via tank frontal. So the boss... Yeah, it just does a tank frontal, and so your tank is responsible generally for trying to get 2 sets of trees cleared off with the frontal. As you see here, this group, they utilize it to actually hit 2 of these sets of trees. And so then they turn into saplings, and after that, the boss is going to do a circle around his character for a second, push everybody back, and then you're going to get a massive circle on your character, and all 5 members of the group are responsible for clearing the remaining sections of trees here. And you can just, like, mark which sections you think you're going to get, that kind of thing. Additionally, if the tank with the frontal hits 2 sections of trees, this becomes a lot easier of an endeavor, because then you only have to get, like, 1 section per player. And so the big tip for this here is to make sure that you get all of the trees dealt with, because after he's going to do a cast, and he's going to blow up every single one of the remaining trees, and it's going to do damage to the party based on how many trees remain. You can probably live 1. Within reason, you could live 2, depending on the key level. Anything past that, and you're really going to start to run into major issues. Beyond that, that's most of the difficulty of the fight. Whenever he does blow up the trees as well, there is just some incidental damage, even without any trees available. Like, if there are no trees up, there's still some damage. But in reality, that's most of the difficulty of the fight. You need to make sure that you're not... that you can't, like, you need to know that you can get healing aggro on the saplings if you're not careful. So making sure that you're positioning yourself, if you're going to get healing aggro, to where the saplings run through the tank, or positioning yourself to where you're running towards the tank as the sapling spawn is important. Additionally, dealing damage to the saplings too early is going to put yourself in a position where the tank is not going to be able to get threat. And so you see right here, this group, they do a great job of making sure that they're not hitting these saplings too early to where they're going to get meleeed, because there's a lot of situations where many players would just get... like, whenever these saplings spawn, if you immediately start AoEing them while they're on top of you, they're going to turn and hit you. Like, that's basically just how it's going to go. They're just going to turn to melee you, and then whenever Leymor does his AoE cast a few seconds later, that can just kill you off. All right, so let's move forward. There's not really much more to talk about with Leymor. This next section, again, this is like a whelp petrified mob section. This is like an auto skip as well. The petrified mobs are generally just the hardest in the dungeon for God knows what reason, and so you just want to walk around these whelps. There is normally a safe zone around the right side. So, like, generally the right side is seen as the easiest path to be able to get towards these next mobs. Now, these elementals, they have... I believe 2 casts. One of them is the most important cast, and it's called Waking Bane. It puts a member of your party to sleep if the cast is successful, and so you need to make sure that you just successfully kick the elementals to get the Waking Bane cast dealt with. Beyond that, it does like an Arcane Bolt, which you can slam just any available interrupts into. It's not that big of a deal. I believe that the Arcane Bolt is just a tank mechanic. So tanks are built to live this kind of thing, especially with the amount of damage that should be going out on this pack. The Arcane Bolt's mostly fine. The Waking Bane, again, it sleeps your player. That's the big thing. Like, that is what you should know that you need to be interrupting. Okay, so now we have like an RP section. I guess I want to talk about one thing real quick. There's an inscription book. So there is an inscription book that's right here. The inscription book allows you to polymorph mobs, like forcing them to not do anything for 10 seconds. So if you have an inscription, a person who has inscription in your group, this is something that you should be looking out to grab. There's 2 of these in the dungeon. I think I know where the second one is. I'll try to point it out. I'm not 100% sure. I do know that this one is right here, though. So yeah, you should be looking to grab that. And then now we're going to move on to the second section of the dungeon. Realistically, the second side of the section of the dungeon is just like rings of trash. So this first ring of trash, you have to kill off all the trash on the platform to be able to let yourself go down the second ring. In addition to that, once you make your way onto this ring of trash, you start channeling a buff on your player. As you do see the members of this party, they have like these purple animations over their characters' heads. Then you get random assorted buffs, and these things vary from 25%. Okay, hold on, let me back this up a little bit. And these vary depending on just a couple of things. They could be as simple as 25% group haste. There's one that's like 25% DR and slows the mobs around them. There's like a frog one that slows the mobs around them as well. It just kind of depends on RNG as to what the buff is going to be. As you see right here, the one that is on the healer and cryptics group, Growl, he's got this circle on it, and you would sit here and think, oh, okay, this is a circle that I should not be looking to stand in. However, this is the haste circle, and how this haste circle works is it is 25% haste to the mobs and 25% haste to the players who stand inside of it. And so generally it's good practice to try to get as many people inside of this haste circle as possible and try to get as few mobs inside of this haste circle as possible. So let's talk about the trash here. There's a lot of elementals on this pack, so that means that there are a lot of Waking Banes that can potentially go off, especially if you're pulling the patrol into this. So just assigning 1 player per Waking Bane and having your tank eat the arcane bolts is what you're going to probably be looking to do more often than not with that kind of pack. In addition, the big curator style mob, he summons a lot of different swirlies on the ground. He has like a cast that also you would like to interrupt. But more or less, he's just like a swirly summoner. As you do see, he's channeling this like forbidden knowledge cast. So I think that Waking Bane is like by far the most important thing here. He does, yeah, he's got a heavy tome cast, and I'm gonna keep it honest with you guys. I'm not exactly sure what the heavy tome does, but it's not something that they interrupted in this group. So I have a suspicion that it's probably tank damage. I think that it's more likely than not just tank damage. It could be something that's like catastrophic. I have yet to wipe to that guy, so I don't think it's like that big of a deal. But I do know that the Waking Bane, I've had people get slept while the forbidden knowledge, cast is going off, and that's actually a big deal. And so here you have more Ellies, more curators. You do have a Fury, which so this is like the Neltharian's Lair Rock Ellie looking dude. The Neltharian's Lair-esque Rock Ellie looking dude, and it works exactly like the Rock Ellies in Neltharian's Lair. They knock your, they have like a tank buster style mechanic where they knock your tank back, and then they do like a piercing shard mechanic where they just will frontal and hit every single player in their path with like a piercing shard. So your tank needs to make sure that they're positioning these Furies super well, and you need to make sure, like as DPS or as healers, that you're not standing in front of these Furies because you will die. And so making sure that you deal with these mobs appropriately is important. And so now we're moving on to the last pack. Again, there's no real new mobs. Oh, we do actually have a Thrasher. So but the Thrasher, again, he's just a... We had a Thrasher in the last pack that I didn't talk about, but what the Thrasher does is he puts circles onto players, not too different looking than the circles from the haste bubble. So first off, he has the Crystalline Rapture, which is the big circle that he puts on himself. And then he does the Splintering Shards, which are circles that he puts on all 5 players. Again, it doesn't look dissimilar from the haste bubble or the haste circle. And so you need to kind of be aware of which circle is which. But just as long as you know that they look very similar, you should be fine, mostly. Last pack here is a Curator plus double Fury. This is a lot of tank damage. Generally, any pack with double Furies is something that you need to watch out for your tank, as the amount of damage that's going out on them is fairly high. And in addition to that, players can just kind of die to assorted mechanics. Okay, so that's that trash. Now, the second ring, you hit after you do this. Hold on, let me back up for a second because I missed an important part. After you kill off this trash, the books spawn themselves, and you're able to click them and go downstairs. Whenever you click them, like you have one more like ring of trash to deal with, but this ring of trash, unlike the previous one, is not mandatory. So technically, there is a world where you could just like shroud all the way around. and click this book that's on the far side, yes, and make your way into the second boss room. Now, that is an option. I don't think you're going to be able to have count if you do something like that, but I'm just saying that is a potential option, that the trash is not mandatory. Now, most of the trash in this area is kind of similar to what we saw previously with, you do still have the elementals. Now you have a new mob, which are these constructs. These constructs, I believe that they're just tank damage, more or less. I think that they have a frontal, so you need to watch out. I think the Arcane Bash is a frontal. And so in addition to that, there are these dragonkin mobs. They're called keepers, and they do 2 casts. One of them is Condensed Frost, which is just tank damage, and then they have like a root style mechanic. Oh gosh, I can't remember what it's called. Icy Bindings. And the Icy Bindings is a mechanic that should be kicked pretty much on CD. Because a lot of the mobs in this area, they have ground effects. And this is one of my main criticisms of this dungeon, is that there are too many ground effects just in this dungeon. Most of the mobs in this area have ground effects, and if you let an Icy Bindings cast go off, that's going to just set you up to get rooted in a mechanic, you get rooted in a construct frontal, you know, that kind of thing. And they do go a little bit large here with how many constructs they end up pulling. The Arcane Bash is very difficult to deal with. Now they let an Icy Bindings go off. This is actually incredibly dangerous, like the pull that they're doing. And so you need to be super conscious that, like, if you, it's easy to go too big here. Something that I also forgot to mention is that whenever you click the book and you go back downstairs, you start channeling another one of these random buffs that I was talking about earlier, which is like the 25% DR, you know, the haste circle, the movement speed reduction on the other mobs, that kind of thing. You start channeling another buff once you make your way to the second ring. And so that's roughly how that works. Now, we're getting into the Azure Blade room, and we're almost on the back end of like the difficult part of the trash. This little bit of trash is a lot easier. Now you just have guards and a keeper, which again, we know the guards do the frontal. The keeper does the Icy Bindings, which is the mob that should be interrupted. There's also an attendant here, which also has a cast that you should be looking to kick, but in reality, these attendants aren't overly dangerous. And so most of the trash that's in this room is fine. There is a patrolling lieutenant, which normally players pull because it makes the boss a lot easier. The lieutenant just does a breath style mechanic, which is aimed at the tank. It does a breath style mechanic, which is aimed at the tank, and dealing with it is a massive amount of tank damage. But a lot of the difficulty of these packs is localized to the tank, making sure that they don't get hit by the frontals, making sure that they don't get hit because the frontals are dodgeable, yes, from the guards, making sure that they also from the lieutenant aren't getting absolutely just blasted and have active mitigation available for them. Those are the kind of things that you're looking for in this pack. I think that taking it slower is generally better here, but obviously with this group, they're going to do whatever they want because they're playing for fun. They're trying to test like their limits, especially in beta early on. It makes a lot of sense. All right. So it looks like we have one pack of trash before the boss, but these are no new mobs, so I don't think that we need to talk about them too much. Let's talk about Azure Blade. Oh, I actually engaged the boss with the trash pack. All right, so let's talk about Azure Blade. So Azure Blade has a couple of mechanics. So first off, he summons these images of himself. Every so often, these do a cast. You can interrupt this. This is totally fine. It just does like a bolt that's on a random player. And so just interrupting it and cleaving it down with either the trash or the boss is normally what's going on. On top of that, Azure Blade has a frontal, which it spams it fairly regularly. It's incredibly dangerous. On top of that, it has an arcane bolt that comes out of its character. And those are the main mechanics on the boss itself. In addition to that, on a timer, not percent-based HP, on a timer, it will go into the middle of the room, and hold on, let me pause for a second because I think it'll be easier to explain if I just take a second. He will go into the middle of the room, summon 4 illusions of himself, which have to be killed off before you move on to back into the main phase where you're able to damage him. He becomes immune. And so you have these 4 illusions here. Then he will channel Overwhelming Energy, where he is shooting these orbs out from his character. And this part of the fight is a major pain in the ass, particularly for your healer, because while he's channeling this Overwhelming Energy, not only is he shooting orbs out, but he is pulsing AoE, and it's not an insignificant amount of AoE as well. And so generally, healers will want you to be stacked up on one illusion and then move as a group around the room, moving to illusion number 2, moving to illusion number 3. And then so you should just like stack up, kill one illusion at a time, and then move around the room. This is a pain in the ass for most range, and this is a pain in the ass for most healers. Anybody who has to plant and cast is going to have a very difficult time here. And you see Cryptic's on a Warlock here. He's standing far away from these overwhelming energies. He's standing far enough away to where he's able to get cleaved by heals, and they're actually splitting it up. So they have a Resto Druid in their group, but it depends on your healer realistically. And look at this. Cryptix and Zyro go to a different illusion than the rest of the group, than their healer and their Havoc Demon Hunter go to. And because of that, they're dropping incredibly low relative to those players. And so it's a situation that you can live if you split up from your group, but it's very dangerous due to the amount of incoming damage that you're going to face. And so beyond that, that's basically all the mechanics that Azure Blade has to offer. On a timer, he will go back into that intermission again, so you likely would love to push him before the second one of these. I've gotten the second one before. That shit's a pain in the ass. Really, really annoying to get a second one of these. But yeah, so you really want to make sure that you're not getting that. Now, this group is doing a high enough key with low enough level gear, so they're doing a 16 Tyrannical Fortified with Thundering. And so they're doing a high enough level key to where they're going to get one. Ideally, you would like to skip the second one, but the blueprint is the exact same for the second one as it was the first one. So now we're moving on into the next trash area. You go... in addition to that, there are checkpoints. Say you die here, there are checkpoints after every single boss. There is a teleporter at the very beginning of the dungeon that allows you to teleport into those boss rooms. And so if we die for whatever reason, we would be able to teleport into here. Okay, so now we have the next trash area. And the next trash area is generally where you're getting a lot of your count. It's a lot of free trash. I don't say a lot of your count, but it's a lot of free trash. Ooh, I found the second book. Here's the second book. It's right here. Same thing goes as before. It's just a long stun on mobs. It's technically a polymorph, but it's a long stun on top of mobs that allows you to it just allows you to get count for free. But the trash here is generally pretty lax. So the breakers have a disrupting shout. Oh, we're actually even going to see the book being picked up by Cryptix here. And so the trash here is more or less fine. The breakers have a bestial roar cast, which hits all players for a decent amount of HP. I believe it's an interrupting shout style mechanic. And then we have the hornswogged, which don't do shit. Like straight up, these hornswogs don't really do anything. They're big chillin', and it's a situation that you just want to stack them up as much as possible. I would recommend, especially at higher levels, not pulling more than 2 breakers at once. However, at low levels, you can easily pull 2 to 3 breakers at a time and be fine. You can pull 3 of them. In addition to the disrupting shout, which is the most important mechanic here, the breaker also has a charge style mechanic that he will charge players and just hit them for some incidental damage. And that's all of the mobs in this area realistically. There's just the hornswogs and the breakers, and so we can kind of skip through here and get to the third boss, which is Executor Tarvald-esque in nature. If you remember this boss from Sanguine Depths, it's kind of similar to that. It's kind of similar to that for a couple of reasons. So first off, first mechanic here is the frost bombs on the players. Once the frost bomb goes off, then you drop this bomb and you drop these puddles. These puddles tick you every 1 second, and so you want to move out of them as fast as possible. Otherwise, you're going to be ticked for some incidental damage. And then the boss has an Icy Devastation cast, which is identical to the Executor Tarvald channel. This can be Feign Death. This can be Vanished Off. You should be looking to pop a personal if you have this on you. And so this is a situation where you are incredibly scared, especially right after you drop those frost circles for that Icy Devastation cast, and you need to make sure that you're going to be able to live. You get a second set of frost bombs, and then you see the boss. He teleported into the middle of the room, and he starts casting this ability called Absolute Zero. With Absolute Zero, the way you mitigate it is you jump into this rune that's right here. You take no damage from Absolute Zero, and then this rune is broken. Like, you are no longer able to go into this room anymore. This is a situation where you are no longer able to go into this guy, and so you have to move around the room and move into the next one of these runes that is on the ground for the next Absolute Zero, because the boss is pretty scripted in what mechanics it's doing. Those are the only real 3 mechanics. You get the frost bombs that go out, you have the Icy Devastation, and then you have the Absolute Zero. And so beyond that, looking at this fight, the mechanics are simple. The amount of incoming damage is very, very high. And the Icy Devastation, I don't know if I mentioned this, but it's like an AoE pulse. Again, absolute carbon copy of the Tarvald AoE. And so you need to make sure that you are dropping these well. In addition to that, if you're playing with like a Demon Hunter, somebody who can jump off the edge and make their way back on, they can drop the puddles like off the platform and then VR or disengage, use a disengage style effect back onto the platform. That's something that you can do to consolidate space. It's not generally seen as super necessary due to the space. Like I've yet to see somebody get through a 4th absolute zero cast. I've seen people get up to 3, but I've yet to see a 4th absolute zero cast. Maybe if you have players die, there could be some issues with that. And Cryptic's here tries to jump off and port back on. Like those are things that you can do to consolidate space. But I mean, look at how much space they have to run to before their next absolute zero goes off, and then their last rune is literally over here, right? So they have 3. They only have 3. There's not like saving space doesn't necessarily do anything for you with the amount of space that you have on the platform here. All right, let's move on to the last boss, which is Umbralskul, I think is the name of this guy. And Umbralskul has a stacking slow. Okay, so first off, the most important mechanic on this fight is the Oppressive Miasma, which is a stacking slow onto players. Previously, the Oppressive Miasma, if you would ever remove it, it would buff the boss. That is no longer the case. That's one of the reasons I couldn't use those previous VODs, because that was no longer the case. The stacking slow can be removed with things like shapeshifting. It can be removed with things like freedoms, you know, and whatnot. In addition to that, if you... Let me pause for a second. The Oppressive Miasma, after you move, has a 10-second duration, and if you stop moving for 10 seconds, you let it time out, and you reset to 0 stacks. Now, if you're at 100, or if you're at 10 stacks, which is the cap, you have a 50% slow, and it is very difficult to move around the room. And at 25% HP intervals, the boss will shatter fragments off of itself, and you need to kill these fragments before the fracture cast goes off. These have a 20-second length, and you just need to make sure that these crystals get killed off. Beyond that, the boss has a massive AoE that it casts around the 1 minute mark that we're going to see here. And then again, it casts at like the 2:55 to 3 minute mark. And so if you're on this fight for a very long time, that was the AoE. If you're on this fight for a very long time, you're going to see this twice. Most groups generally are only going to see it once. And so that's more or less how the fight works. He just shatters himself every 25%. Make sure that you kill the crystals. Make sure that you drop your slows as often as possible, so that way you can position yourself super well for the crystals, especially if you're playing a melee or a tank. And then beyond that, it's about just like cleaving down the boss, making sure that the crystals get killed, and you are good to go. That is Umbralskul, and that's going to conclude Azure Vault. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the series, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.